I was about 16 to 17 years old when I came home from school. It was an ordinary day like any other. Nothing portended trouble. A state when you walk along a familiar route. You know that your loved ones are waiting for you at home, and the evening ahead of you is full of tranquility. I didn't realize that this day would forever change the perception of my ancestral home. My brother was loudly rattling the dishes in the kitchen, and as I passed his bedroom, I decided to go in to see what he was doing there. But what I saw made me stop on the threshold. My mom was sitting on his bed, her back to me, facing the wall. The room was plunged into darkness. The only light coming through the crack under the door barely illuminated her silhouette. She didn't move, didn't speak, just sat in that corner of the room, as if she'd lost all connection to reality. At first I thought she was just feeling sick, or maybe she was thinking about something important. But as I got closer, my heart sank at the strange sensation. In the darkness, her figure looked like a statue, unnaturally frozen. I stopped at the door and, hesitating to enter, asked what seemed to me to be an ordinary question. "Is everything all right, Mother?" Her answer was slow, as if she was speaking through force, and her words sounded strange, even alien. "I'm just sitting here. Come here, I need to talk to you." I began to take steps in her direction, feeling the tension in the room grow and the air grow heavy with each movement. And then, on the same level, as if her words were out of this world, I suddenly heard a familiar voice from the kitchen. "Mom." She was talking and setting the table for dinner, without any anxiety or worry. My feet felt as if they had been borne to the floor, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. I looked back toward my brother's bedroom again, but this time the room was empty. I stood at the door, stunned, not knowing what to do. Where was Mom, who was sitting on her bed? I felt like I was witnessing something inexplicable. Someone else was in the room, with the same body but with a different mood, with some alien energy. At that moment I became truly scared, but I couldn't take my eyes off the empty space. I never went into that room myself, and years later I never dared to go back there alone. The feeling that something abnormal had settled in that place haunted me. A lot of time passed after that event, but the fear did not go away. Over the years, I became more and more suspicious of what was happening in our house. In those days, it often seemed to me that the walls of our house hid something more than just silence. This feeling grew stronger with each day I spent there. Later, something else strange happened that left me with an even greater sense of unease. I was home with my mom and we were working in the yard doing some gardening. My younger brothers, who were still babies at the time, were happily jumping on the trampoline when I noticed that they suddenly froze. I thought they were just tired or playful, but they continued to sit in a strange pose, facing the window of my room. I watched them, feeling something vaguely creeping into these moments. They began to talk, but it was something unusual. The sounds of their voices, as if distorted, reached us, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. It was as if we could only hear half of the conversation, or even not hear the words at all, but just feel them. I listened, and I didn't immediately realize what was going on until my older brother spoke up. "Yes, yeah, they're okay." "No, okay." I felt bad. Mom and I exchanged glances. I felt something invisible pulling me into this strange, tense silence that filled the space around us. Mom, sensing something was wrong, asked, "Who are you guys talking to?" My brother didn't turn around, didn't look at us, but continued to sit on the springboard, continuing this strange conversation. His answer struck us to the core. "She says she's our great-grandmother. She misses you." Mom turned pale and I couldn't believe my ears. We both knew that great-grandma had died long before my brothers were even born. They had no memories of her. How could this be? Someone invisible to us was talking to them. Mom answered in a trembling voice, "Sunshine, but great-grandmother is in heaven." My brother's words, cold and devoid of any emotion, continued the nightmare. Not anymore. After that, they started jumping on the trampoline again as if nothing had happened. But I stood there and felt goosebumps running down my back. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just a fantasy. This was something real, unknown, ominous. I couldn't figure out who or what had become their interlocutor, but this wasn't just a random moment. My mom and I sat in complete silence as they continued to play as if nothing had happened. But that shadow remained in us. In that moment, I realized that this house held many more secrets than we could have imagined. A few years later, in 2017, I left Florida, and I've rarely seen my family since. But every time I visited them, I made sure to avoid extra glances into dark corners. I never went into those rooms again. Every night stay there became a real ordeal for me. I never left my room after sundown. Couldn't. I felt like something, or someone, was watching me. And it's still like that whenever I find myself in that house. The shadows that lurk within its walls give me no peace. Now, when I return to the house, I can feel the dark memories echoing in the dark corners. The feeling that someone still lives there. And I don't know where reality ends and something much more sinister begins.
Story 2. Black Shadow. When nightmares become reality. My girlfriend and I are in a long-distance relationship. She lives in Australia and I live in Canada, and we often have to take turns traveling to see each other to keep in touch. In 2018, I traveled to visit her in Australia. It was a special visit because it was the first time I had been to see her, not for a couple days, but for a few weeks. She and I were happy that we could finally be together, but at the same time there was some strange sense of anxiety that I couldn't explain. She lived with her mom in a small house, and her room wasn't exactly ordinary. It was an outbuilding attached to the garage, and to get into the house, you had to go through the garage. The place always seemed a little strange, but I thought it was just because of the unfamiliar surroundings. But after that incident, everything changed. One night, I woke up around 1 o'clock. Everything around me was quiet, with only the shadow from the window flitting across the walls. But what really alarmed me was the strange red light that illuminated the room. It wasn't bright, but it gave the feeling of something wrong. I stood up, trying to figure out what was going on. As I looked up at the ceiling, I saw something that couldn't be explained. There was a black figure crawling on the ceiling. It moved in a way that no human being could move. It was something incredibly scary because the figure wriggled across the ceiling as if its bones were broken and shifting. It didn't walk, it didn't crawl, it literally slid, as if its body was incapable of making normal movements. At that moment, I felt cold sweat covering my body and my heart started pounding with such force that I thought it was about to burst out of my chest. I tried to call out for the girl, but no sound came out of my throat. My body was like in a daze. I couldn't move. Suddenly I screamed, and the moment the sound came out, the figure seemed to freeze in place. Suddenly, the girl woke up. She opened her eyes, quickly looked around the room, and cried out when she saw the same thing. We both screamed, unable to realize what it was. I grabbed a pillow to throw it towards the figure as if that could stop what was happening, but in that moment everything disappeared. I felt darkness engulf me, and it was as if the world around me began to blur. I lost consciousness, and when I woke up, everything was quiet. My girlfriend was sleeping peacefully beside me. I lay in bed for a long time, not realizing what had happened. The thought flashed through my mind that it was all just a nightmare, but the feeling of fear wouldn't let me go. I got up, deciding to freshen up a bit, and went through the garage into the main house to go to the bathroom. The door between the garage and the house was always massive, and it clicked hard when it was opened. I knew that if I did it too loudly, I would wake up the girl's mom, whose bedroom was right next door. I tried to open the door as quietly as possible, but I still heard the familiar loud click when it finally opened. Suddenly, a sound came from inside the room. The girl's mother had woken up. I froze, realizing that she was probably startled. Deciding that I had scared her, I quickly went back into the room and woke the girl up. I told her to calm her mom down, because apparently she had heard my noise and was scared. About 20 minutes later, the girl came back with a face full of worry. She asked me if I had seen anything strange in my dream, and I told her about the red light and the figure on the ceiling. Her eyes rounded, and she confessed, without restraint of excitement, that she had seen the same thing. She said that when I opened the door to the house, her mom woke up to a loud noise. But she didn't freak out because of me. She saw a black silhouette standing in front of her bed. The mother also passed out and only came to her senses when the girl started to wake her up. We were both in complete shock. It was as if time had frozen, and I couldn't believe what we had experienced. We tried to find an explanation, but we couldn't. It was all too real, and the feeling that something sinister was watching us never left us. It wasn't just a coincidence or the effect of a bad dream. We both saw it, and it was a real nightmare that the girl and her mom and I shared. From that moment on, I was much more careful about being in that house. Even when I left, the thoughts of what might be lurking in that place never left me. The night terrors became a reality, and I could no longer look at the shadows in the corners and not feel their presence. I didn't know what it was, but one thing was clear. What we were seeing could not be explained by a dream or some illusion. It was a real shadow that was following us.
Story 3, That Woman Who Disappeared, The Mystery of Helping at the Toughest Moment. It was the mid-90s and I was about 14 years old when our family found ourselves in the most difficult situation of our lives. We were moving from Texas to Tacoma, Washington. The journey was long and tiring, and our financial situation was getting worse with every mile. We had spent the last of our money and almost reached our destination, but we were running out of gas and had run out of food even earlier. I felt like we were stuck on the brink of despair. We stopped in Chico, California at a small gas station to get at least a little break and maybe find a way to continue on our way. My mom was very calm as always, but I could sense that she was worrying as much as I was. She took my younger sisters to the bathroom and I stayed in the car, hoping for a miracle. We all felt like we were on the brink of an abyss. There was no clarity on what to do next. All we could do was hope for a chance, some twist of fate that would bring us back to normal. I sat in the car, lost in thought. My mind was spinning with thoughts about the future, about how we would survive, how we would continue our journey. There seemed to be no way out. I looked under my feet, trying to find some comforting thoughts, but everything was bleak. All I could imagine was the dark prospects before us. Mom and my sisters left in the direction of the restroom, and I was alone in this quiet, almost forgotten corner of the world, at a gas station, in a small town. Suddenly, I heard a car door open. The sound made me raise my head. A woman, with brown hair, wearing dark clothes, was sitting next to me in the car. It wasn't just a stranger, she was somehow different. Her whole presence made me feel strange, like she didn't belong in this world. She didn't look like an ordinary passerby or a passenger who happened to sit next to her. There was some incredible calm look in her eyes, full of deep understanding, something mystical that I couldn't explain. She sat silent, but in her gaze I felt as if she knew everything that was happening to us, knew our worries and our pain. I was so scared at that moment, and I felt the fear growing in my chest, but it was as if she was diminishing it with her presence. And then, breaking the silence, she said to me, "It looks like your luck has turned away from you. Take this and give it to your mother. May she give this debt someday to someone in need." Before I could even realize what she meant, she held something out to me, and I took it without a second thought, as if something in her words made me trust her. But when I looked into my hand, I saw that I was holding $100, a single bill. This bill was smooth, clean, and without a single crease. It was as if it came from somewhere else in the world, as if this woman had not just brought us money, but salvation. I was stunned and couldn't believe what was happening. When I looked up to thank her or ask where she was from, she was gone. She was gone as suddenly as she had appeared. I looked around the parking lot empty. There wasn't a soul around. It was like the woman had vanished into thin air, and I didn't even hear her footsteps or see her leave. She just disappeared. At that moment I felt both shock and relief, as if she had come to us to change our fate. I burst into tears at the realization of what had happened and how much it had changed my perception of the world. When my mom and my sisters came back, I told her everything. I couldn't contain my emotions. My mom cried too. She and I sat in the car, looked at each other and realized that this situation was not an accident. It was something more than just meeting a stranger. The woman left us $100, and it was a miracle that seemed to come out of nowhere that we used that money to buy gasoline. But that was just the beginning. When we were about to get back in the car, I noticed that there was a guy standing near the gas station selling oranges. We bought a whole bag from him and decided to take a little vacation. We drove to a local park that was on the bank of a river. We sat there, enjoying the fresh air and the silence. We sat on the grass, ate oranges, bathed, and for a while all problems were left behind. At that moment we felt alive, and this vacation was a true gift of fate. We knew we had to be grateful for this moment of happiness. After a few hours of rest, we returned to the car and continued our journey to Tacoma. Although I still couldn't understand what had happened, one thing was clear to me: thanks to that woman, not only had we survived this difficult moment, but we felt that there was light at the end of the tunnel. We made it to Tacoma and started building a new life, but that moment has stayed with us forever. We will never forget that woman with brown hair who came and disappeared as if she was an angel who had gotten lost along the way. Thank you, strange woman with the ability to become invisible. We will never forget your kindness, and you will always be in our hearts. That moment changed us, and I believe that sometimes life gives us miracles that cannot be explained, but that stay with us for a lifetime.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. There are a lot of interesting stories waiting for you.